Hi, everyone. Welcome to the end of Texas Wine Month and our Texas Wine Month virtual series. My name is Kelsey. If you've been tuning in for these, say hi to me in the comments. Tell me which episode was your favorite already. If you're watching recorded, thank you for watching these recorded. All the ones that we did previously are on our Facebook and YouTube pages. At William Press Vineyards. So check those out. Go back and learn a little bit about the Texas High Plains and about High Estate, which is where our vineyard is at William Press Vineyards, and what makes Texas special, which was our very first episode. So for those who haven't joined us before, what we've been doing is we've been hopping on every week during Texas Wine Month to drink Texas wine and to celebrate the fact that we have the opportunity to talk about a local product and support it. We've been elevating the conversation by having it be a little bit more educational than normal. And I'm the Director of Education at William Chris, so just doing my job, spreading the good word of Texas wine and making it really nerdy for you guys. I've pulled out some really fun things, I hope, for y'all, including maps like this and like this, both of which I will go back to and show y'all again today. But first, we must get wine in the glass. It is that kind of month. Texas Wine Month is, if you can believe it, really, really crazy. ACL happened. Oktoberfest is happening. There's a lot going on in this month that also happens to be Texas Wine Month. And so I'm in need of not just one glass of wine, but two. And so we're going to taste two wines today. I'll show y'all what I'm going to be opening. And if you got the pack for this virtual series, you should open these as well. We are drinking the 2019 Artist Blend. It looks like this. The Artist Blend is the cool bottle where every year people submit artwork to compete to be on the label. So this year, this was the label. The next year was different. The next year after that was different, and so on and so forth. And we're also drinking the 2019 Tannat. Tannat is the grape variety, and this is from Vintage Press Vineyard. One thing that both of these have in common is they are both from the Texas Hill Country. And last week we tasted Texas High Plains wine. So this is going to be a nice contrast to the conversation we had last week when we talked about the Texas High Plains. All right, I'm going to see who's hitting me up in the comments. Y'all open some wine. Make sure to season your glass. Hi, John and Julie. It's good to see y'all. I did see your email. I won't be there on the day that y'all are going to be out in November, but I'm trying to find a way to sneak on site and see if I can sit down with y'all and give y'all a tasting. Hi, Mana. It's good to see you from San Marcos. Steve Martin, welcome back. It's good to see you. Were you watching last week or did you have to miss? I didn't see your name pop up, so maybe you were just quiet. Hi, Glenn. Nice to see you. And Indrani as well. Mark and Kathy in San Antonio. Oh no, I'm sorry, the comments aren't working on your account, but this works just fine. Hi, Jennifer and Alan. Good to see y'all. Wonderful that you had the 2019 Artist Blend, Glenn. Well done. Tell us how it was drinking yesterday, and I'll tell y'all how it's drinking today. Mark Brown. So Mark Brown said, did we season our glass in the oven? We missed that class. Yes. Every week I share a tip of the day, and my tip of the day in week 1, we've been popping in the comments and saying, season your glass, season your glass. So what that means, what my tip of the day was that when you have a glass that hasn't had any wine in it before, getting wine in it and then dumping it out is a great way to make sure that your wine glass is primed for the tasting of wine. And this is really only when we're doing technical wine tasting. If you're just going to enjoy a glass, I don't know that it matters that much, but a seasoned glass, a wine glass that has had wine in it recently, rather than water or nothing, is best to drink your wine out of. And I call it seasoning the glass. But no, please don't stick it in the oven. No need to rub oil on it or glaze the pan. We are glazing with wine. And you just need about a half ounce. I'll show y'all again what it is. Is everyone addicted to seasoning their glasses now? I'm really curious. Tell me if you've been seasoning your glass obsessively in the last couple of weeks since we've been talking. Mark, I'm glad you've learned something already. That is the goal. That is the goal. It's always wonderful to see y'all each week. I love doing these on a Thursday. But what I really, really like to hear from all of you, even if you're watching this recorded, please tell me, what days and times do you like to have virtual classes? And when you come on site to do a class with us, what days and times do y'all like to come in and do classes? I'm currently building out the rest of our 2023 class season, and I'm building the 2024 season. So I want to hear from you guys. What topics do y'all want to be talking about? When do you want to be talking about them? Tell me all of the information, and I will use it for the purpose of making sure that y'all get everything you need. Okay, so this is the artist blend. I am seasoning my glass. Don't shame me for pouring some out. I'm making sure that what I do drink, I get the most out of. And that's what I want with just about every wine that I drink. And then I pour the real amount. And I recommend doing this with the decanter as well. So now for my tip of the day for this week. So we've recapped seasoning the glass. That's great. My tip of the day for this week is, now that I have wine in the glass, I am not going to swirl it immediately. It is so tempting, and it's very, very difficult to not swirl it immediately. But to get the most out of this wine and to tell the most about it, because I know that it's a quality wine, I know that it's great quality, that it's going to smell like a lot of stuff. The way to maximize everything is, now that I've splashed it in the glass, I'm going to take a quick sniff with my lips just parted slightly so that there's airflow in my nasal cavity. So quick sniff, I am registering the wine. It smells soft. It smells fruity. It's red fruit. There's a little bit of blue fruit in there. I expect there's a lot more going on, but I'm getting a first impression of the wine. And then, yes, swirl it up, like swirl it up good. You want to stir this around, get a lot of oxygen in there. I'm causing for fruity esters to pop up. I'm causing for floral aromas to pop up. Some of them will jump out of the glass, and then the rest of them will sit in this bowl, in the widest part of the bowl, which is why I only fill it up to just below the widest part of the bowl. Actually, you're getting a 2-for-1 today. This is the second tip. I fill my wine glass up to just below the widest part of my bowl so that all of those fruity esters and aromas are sitting right on top of the wine in the widest part of the glass. I want my aromas there, not my wine there, if that makes sense. And then I smell again. And this is a long, drawn-out breath where I'm trying to reconcile what the wine smells like now after I've swirled it. And then I just talk to myself about what changed. It is still red fruited and blue fruited. I know that over time that is going to be retained, but it's more punchy, more intense. There's spice aromas there that I didn't get at first. And there's also a really intense violet aroma. All of that's new to me, and sniffing, swirling, and then smelling again allowed me to get the full picture of the wine. So that is my second tip of the day. It's become a habit of mine, and with some wines, it's more exciting than with others. This wine, it was relatively the same with more intensity when I swirled, but some wines, they'll smell like one thing. You'll swirl them up, and they will completely change. And who knows what that tells you about a wine, but it's really exciting to see the difference. And then as I sip and swirl this wine during this session, I'll continue to check back in with the wine, do check-ins, and talk to myself about how the wine has continued to change. And that's the most exciting part of wine for me. I hope it is for y'all as well. I sniff the top of the bottle always to make sure that there's nothing funky sitting on top that might be a wine flaw. If you see me doing that, it's another great habit that I have. So I have the artist blend in one glass and the Tannat in the second. These are both from the same vineyard. So today we're talking about Vintage Press Vineyard, which is in the Texas Hill Country, as I mentioned. I'm going to show you a bunch of maps today so that y'all can see exactly where these wines came from. But a really cool thing about this comparison is that the artist blend is a blend of 4 grape varieties. So this is a blend of Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, and Tannat, just like this Tannat here. Actually, it is the same Tannat because these both came from the same year, and there's vintage pressed Tannat in this wine. It is the same juice blended in that this wine was made from. So what I'm looking at here, and I hope that some of y'all have this comparative tasting as well, I'm looking at how this Tannat folded in and aided this blend in becoming whatever it wanted to be. I can already tell something about what the Tannat added to the blend because the color difference is so different. I don't know how easily y'all can tell. This is the Tannat. It is really, really inky black. No, sorry, that's the artist blend, really inky black. And sorry, this is the artist blend. It is not inky black. It's really clearly seen through. And then this is the Tannat, and you can tell this is the inky black. So the color in this artist blend is likely mostly coming from the Tannat. And maybe the other grape varieties in there did not add as much color in, or else that wine would be a lot deeper. And before someone asks, I know someone will, there is 6% Tannat in this artist blend. This is juicy. And it's fresh, juicy fruit. It's not jammy. It's not dry. There's a really refreshing character here that is pretty characteristic of this vineyard. There's a freshness that I think comes with the soil type of this vineyard. Ah, wonderful. Jennifer asked, what temperature is my wine? I'm drinking these at room temperature, which is a little bit warmer than I would typically like. I'd say they're probably 70 degrees, and I like to drink my wines around, maybe not 70 degrees, maybe 65. I like to drink my wines around 55, which is colder than many people would like to enjoy them, but it's not bad. To me, the cool temperature allows for the wines to come up in temperature in the glass, and they continue to change, just like swirling the wine. A wine coming up in temperature will change just as much, and I like to see that transformation. But for my purposes today, this will work. I have also recommended some food pairings with these wines. I recommended a washed rind cheese, which is a really funky, umami, heavy, creamy style cheese, just depending on the washed rind cheese that you get. And I recommended rye chips as well. And that's really an ode to this Tannat, which has a really, really rustic, gamey, meaty character to it. I think rye will go really well with that. And typically with rye chips, you're getting a significant amount of salt, which should soften this wine, which will help further transform the wine into something else. Mark, that's a good point. I could have put my seasoning wine in the decanter. And that's probably a thing I could do. I would also season this decanter, but if I poured the seasoning wine into the decanter and then I dumped out the decanter, it would be a way to not dump out as much wine, but half an ounce is all I'm talking here. It's about the amount that's left over in a bottle if you don't squeeze out every drop. But I understand, and it's really personal preference. Okay, so let's get into our discussion for the day. Now that I've done our tips of the day, I do have a script that I'm working off here because otherwise I just go right off left field and talk about whatever I please. But I want to make sure we stay focused on a topic today. And the topic is the Côtes of Texas, the Côtes of Texas. This means the hills of Texas. So obviously we're going to be talking about a little region called the Texas Hill Country, a little large region called the Texas Hill Country. This is the largest AVA in all of Texas. It just beats the Texas High Plains by 1 million acres or so. And the reason we're calling it the Côtes of Texas, obviously because there are hills there, but this is an ode to the Côtes of Bordeaux, which is, I'm going to show you a map now, but it's not going to be on my screen. It's going to be right here behind me. I happen to have a Bordeaux map up here. I went to a Bordeaux tasting and seminar with the L'École de Vin de Bordeaux. They're an educational institution that goes around and shares about what's currently happening in Bordeaux and the changes that are happening. There's a movement towards organic and sustainable farming. There are new varieties being introduced to the area. It's a really, really exciting time to talk about Bordeaux. And I found a lot of the topics to be very similar to what we talk about with the Texas Hill Country. And so I've wanted to talk about this for a long time. And while I'm going to introduce the Texas Hill Country to you today, talk about how it forms, the soil types, and the exciting things that are happening there, I also want to directly tie it to the Côtes of Bordeaux, which is really exciting areas for young winemakers, the new generation of winemakers, female winemakers, sustainability, and then some really cool wines that they can be value wines. But each of the hills in this area of Bordeaux has a different personality, and that's what I want to get into today. So let's take a closer look at Bordeaux. Scoot over here. So this is my Bordeaux map. Bordeaux is separated into three regions, really. Mainly we talk about the left and the right bank, and then there's an in-between area called the Entrée du Mer. The left bank is along here, along the left bank of the Gironde River or estuary, and then the right bank is on the other side of that. And each one of those banks is known for vastly different soil types, and therefore different grape varieties that are used on the left or the right bank. Mostly we're talking about blends here. We're talking about white and red wine blends. So on the right bank of Bordeaux, typically we talk about Merlot with a little bit of Cab Franc typically, and a smattering of other grape varieties as well. But down here, there is an area, a collection of regions. I'm sorry, we're talking down here. Down here, there's a collection of areas that are affected by hills, and each hill will have a different personality because of the way that it's facing, because of the winds that impact it, because of the level of drainage, depending on how steep or not steep the hill is, depending on how nutrient rich the soil is or how nutrient poor the soil is. Whether the grapes are facing the equator, how high the level of sunshine is, whether there are clouds impacting the area, and then of course, soil type. All of this goes into creating a couple of regions that have, they're all hilly areas, but each hill has been associated with a different character. So from one coat, you'll get more juicy, jammy, rich styles of Merlot. And from other areas, you'll get drier, more intense, brooding, more tannic styles of Merlot-based blends. And this is something that I feel will eventually be tied to, hopefully sooner rather than later, the Texas Hill Country, because we have many different hills in the Texas Hill Country, and each of them should have a different character. And that's really the way that the Texas Hill Country was petitioned for. Today, I have the Texas Hill Country petition with me. I love to have these. I love to read them. And this one's a quick read. It's 12 pages. If anyone has interest in learning about the ABAs of Texas, there are 8 of them. A lot of them have really long petitions, like the Texas High Plains has a very, very long petition, but the Texas Hill Country is a quick read. You get basically a bite-sized image of the Texas Hill Country and the reasons that it was created and established in the first place. So this petition, there's a lot of spots in the petition where it's stated that we don't have enough information on this, or we don't know quite what the boundaries should be. It's really hard to draw the boundaries here. And so we're just going to go for this answer and let's see if that works for us. So not all questions were answered, but the questions that are answered for the Texas Hill Country are the climate and how it's different than the surrounding climate, the surrounding area. Basically defining why that area isn't a larger area. It's kind of kept to the large area that it's in, defines the way that the soil patterns were created. It defines the terrain of the area and more than that. So that's what we're going to dig into today. But first, I'm going to check the comments to see if y'all have any questions so far. I'm going to taste a little bit of these wines and just give y'all an idea of the comparison. And then I'm going to try it with my food pairing today, which is that washed rind cheese. And I don't have rye chips. I have a really dark chocolate with me today. And so that's what I want to give y'all. So if y'all are tasting wine, tell me what you're tasting and tell me what you're pairing it with. Ooh, Mark says Kathy has Taleggio, which is fantastic. If y'all have these 2 wines, please tell me how that Taleggio is with both of these. These are really impactful wines. They hit you in the face. They have a lot of density and a lot of character. And so that's why I picked a really strong cheese for this that would stand up to those. And Glenn, great question. Are each hill their own AVA or whatever the French call them? So in Bordeaux, these are called AOCs. They're appellations that are controlled appellations, essentially. An AOC has geographic boundaries. It has a name, but there are also certain conditions that the producers and wine growers in that area would have to apply to the way that they make wine and the way that they grow wine. So this can control things like yield, so how many grapes that you can grow on the vine. It can control production methods. It can control even what kind of grapes that you plant. The Texas Hill Country, of course, is not restricted to anything. We can grow whatever we want virtually. The Texas Hill Country is just a geographic boundary that has certain patterns that are associated with it in soil, climate, and terrain. So in France, yes, each of these côtes are separate AOCs, separate appellations. And when we dig into our conversation about the Texas Hill Country, you'll see that the Texas Hill Country is starting to be pieced apart, just like each of these côtes. And so there are river basins that we're following and identifying as areas that have differences from the surrounding areas. And that's what we're going to get into today as I show my map. But let's take these two wines. I have the Artist Blend on the left and the Tannat on the right. I can already tell that color is something that the Tannat added to this wine. There's a lot of different, it's a very fruity wine with lots of spice. And it kind of hits at all areas of the glass, which is exactly what a Rhone style blend is supposed to do. A blend like this is supposed to hit at different spots so that there's a broadness to it and a richness to it that you might not get from a single variety wine. So with the Artist Blend, I would pair this wash rind cheese. Yeah, just based on the smell alone, I can tell it's awesome. So the wine didn't change too much. What happened was that the funkiness of the cheese was muted a little bit and it became a part of the wine. So they kind of melded together. That's really, really unique. That doesn't always happen. And it's not. It's totally dark. There's a lot of smoke. It's not actually that fruity. So the fruitiness in this blend must come from the other three grape varieties. And I know that Grenache is a very fruity grape, so that's likely where that came from. And y'all know Tannat is known for tannin. So it is really drying my mouth out. I'm going to taste this chocolate with it. There's no sugar added to this chocolate, 73.5% cacao. That's really lovely. The wine is more tart afterwards, but the tannins have melted away. And I love that in a wine. So tell me what you're thinking about these, this comparison tasting if you have it in front of you. And I'm going to jump into our discussion of the Texas Hill Country. By the way, we had a lot of rainfall tonight. Did anyone have trouble getting on or with internet? I was down earlier, and so I'm glad I'm back up for this, but I am just a little bit concerned, and I'm talking kind of fast because of it. I'm concerned that we're going to go down because of the rain, but pray not. All right, so I've told you about the Côtes of Bordeaux. What's interesting about the right bank Bordeaux is there's a lot of sand and clay, and there's a lot of limestone as well. More themes that tie us to the Texas Hill Country. So the Texas Hill Country is an AVA that was established in 1991, the year of my birth. And it was established as a really large area that didn't have a lot of action as far as grapes over the last 150 years before, but it had started to see more European grapes be planted in the late 1970s. So there were about 5 producers at the time and a handful of growers in the area, but a lot of excitement was centered around this region as we were figuring out how to work with it. And so there was big support to push this AVA through so that it could be defined as a unique grape growing area. And this area in Texas in particular is unique because it's centered around the majority of the wineries that are located in Texas. So whereas last week we talked about the Texas High Plains, There are some producers up there, definitely, lots of growers up there, but the majority of that fruit is being made, cellared, stored, and poured 400 miles away in the Texas Hill Country. And so the Texas Hill Country is a really nice grape growing area because if you can harvest the grapes in your backyard and then make the wine there, you don't have to go through the trouble of traveling those grapes, making sure that they can get to the place that you are going to be pouring them. There's a little bit less risk as far as cellaring. You don't use as much gas. So you have more consistency and a little bit less lift. This may mean something that affects the price of your wine as well. But the Texas Hill Country will continue to be explored and excavated because it's where we do the majority of our work. It's where I am right now. It's where all of my coworkers are. It's where we do our work. And so we can expect that this really large grape growing area, it's 9 million acres, we can expect that this will be pieced apart and that AVAs within the Texas Hill Country will definitely emerge. There are 2 current AVAs in the Texas Hill Country. I'm going to share my map with you so you can see what those are. The 2 AVAs that are, actually, I need to share this with you so that you can see. I'm looking at the bottom part right here. So this is the Texas Hill Country AVA. There are 2 current AVAs inside of the Texas Hill Country. They were established before the Texas Hill Country was established. So this is Bell Mountain AVA and Fredericksburg in the Texas Hill Country AVA. And then came the Texas Hill Country. Now on this map, I also have regions of note because just saying the Texas Hill Country as a region has a certain style associated with it is a little bit tough to get past because it is such a large area. And when we start to talk about what the terrain is and the variation of soil types, you'll see why we're starting to look at specific areas within the Texas Hill Country to get a more clear view of singular styles within the Texas Hill Country. So one that we're going to talk about is the Llano Uplift. That's in the north half of the Texas Hill Country. It's about 1.4 million acres. And then another we're going to talk about is the Pedernales River Basin. And that is where these 2 wines grow. So when we talk about these 2 wines, we talk about them coming from the Texas Hill Country and from a specific vineyard. But there is a smaller region within the Texas Hill Country that's defined by different characteristics that will say that these wines will taste different than wines made just like this from the same grape varieties that are growing outside of the Pedernales River Basin, even if they're still within the Texas Hill Country. And so now's this time for exploration. All of the excitement that's centered around this petition for the Texas Hill Country is, this is where we were headed. The excitement is following through. We are finding it possible to grow grapes in the Texas Hill Country, and not just possible to grow grapes, but to grow quality grapes. And it's maybe grapes that we didn't expect, like Tannat, which is thick-skinned, has a lot of tannin, has a lot of pigment in the skin that protects it from heat, sunshine, and it feeds off of the heat in the Texas Hill Country. Hot days and warm nights are exactly what this type of grape variety is looking for. And as we identify these grape varieties that are well suited to the conditions here, the excitement is going to continue. Grenache, Syrah, Mervet, and Tannat, 4 grape varieties that are doing stunning things in the Texas Hill Country and are showing off the terroir and how it ranges across the Hill Country. So let's talk about what defines the Texas Hill Country. So about half of Texas is, I think it's a little over half of Texas actually, is a humid subtropical climate. And the Texas Hill Country definitely falls into this. So hot days and warm nights and moisture in the air is what we're looking at here. The Texas Hill Country has a slightly different climate, but significant enough to be designated as a wine growing region with some excitement than the surrounding areas. So we're working with humid subtropical. There's no way to get away from that. But the climate in the Texas Hill Country is mitigated by a couple different things. First is elevation. We are at 600 feet elevation here, up to 2,500 feet elevation. And as we go up, every mile we go up, it gets 1 degree cooler. And so at elevation, we're getting the cooler temperatures, at least at night, if not during the day as well. But there's wind that comes off of the Gulf that is warm and humid. There's pressure that pushes that up north of the Texas Hill Country and invites wind from the Chihuahua Desert to come in and play around the Texas Hill Country. That wind is warm and dry. That's great. It means the Texas Hill Country is affected by less humidity than the surrounding areas. We're still humid subtropical, can't get away from that. But that mitigation by that wind, that dry wind coming through, allows for some of the humidity to go away. And so the temperature at night gets cooler faster. Not much colder, but it cools down faster. So compared to the surrounding area for the Texas Hill Country, we have the ability to have longer times with the cooler temperatures. They won't be very cool, but there will be more time with that cooler temperature. And that is really, really important for retaining things like freshness and acidity in wine, and ultimately allowing the grapes to hang on the vine for a little bit longer, which is really important in Texas. The other cool thing about the Texas Hill Country is the wind that's piling up and coming in from the Chihuahua Desert. It ends up gliding across the Texas Hill Country and then pooling within the valleys in the hills. So we have an intersection of winds that comes together and creates little cooling and drying pools of air. It keeps wind moving. It keeps disease pressure a little bit more at bay. And disease pressure in a humid subtropical climate is something that we really, really have to consider. So where your vineyard is planted amongst the hills and the valleys is really important, because benefiting from that nighttime moving dry air is really, really important. But the Texas Hill Country is tilted. It's like this, just a little bit. So it's highest in the northwest, and it's lowest in the southeast. So the wind that comes off of the Chihuahua Desert from west to east, it will end up speeding up as it goes down and slides off into the Gulf. And so you have a rapid cooling and drying effect from that wind. The fast movement of that wind and the dry factor of it allows for us to have longer, cooler temperatures at night in the Texas Hill Country. Really, really important for what we call diurnal shift. It is a change in temperature between day and night. This is something we talked about with the Texas High Plains. We talked about the High Plains having a significant diurnal shift. The diurnal shift in the Texas Hill Country is going to be less, but we still have it, and it's really important. And it creates the balance that we find in these wines. I'm just checking out the comments. Kathy's saying that spice comes out more with the wine with this cheese. That's awesome. Mark, you noticed that there is a rusty brown dust at Uplift that was everywhere. A rusty brown dust at Uplift Vineyard, I'm guessing is where you're talking about. Yeah, let's talk about the soil types of the Texas Hill Country, which is my favorite conversation. So the first thing you need to know before we get into soil types is how the base material of this area formed originally. So about 260 million years ago, Texas was entirely underwater. And one of the deepest areas was in the Texas Hill Country area and along the Gulf Coast. This caused for minerals that are in the water to precipitate out, form layers of sandstone, limestone, really mineral-rich sedimentary rock, and it created it in layers. You can see those layers if you go look at the Balconies Fault. That fault line is a big shift in elevation. It's where you have like 400 feet shift in elevation from the Gulf Coast up to the Edward Plateau, which is where the Texas Hill Country is. You can see those layers of limestone and sandstone and sedimentary rocks stacked on top of each other. Each of them are different colors. Each of them are different ages. Each of them have different minerals that had precipitated out of that water. And once the water receded, that's what we were left with, layers of the sedimentary rock, which can be soft in some places and harder in some places, depending on the pressure that was put on top of it. So where we have that deeper water in Texas, like in the Texas Hill Country, we have more pressure that has really, really stacked and squished that sedimentary rock so that it has hard cores in some places. And then in other places, it starts to break up because it's softer and it breaks up into the soil. This alone is causing a big variation across the Texas Hill Country. But what it means is we have a high amount of calcareous soil in the Texas Hill Country, and that's really mineral rich soil. We have lots of nutrients in those soils. We have a lot of salt in those soils, a lot of organic matter in those soils, just depending on where in the Texas Hill Country you are. Now, after the water receded, we clearly have a dry Texas. There were many river basins that there currently are many river basins that formed as water receded from Texas. And those river basins typically run from the Northwest out to the Southeast and out into the Gulf. Each of these river basins of Texas, of which there are many, they cut through Texas and they deposit soils from one place to another in their path. They caused for organic matter to be spread across Texas, fossilized in some places. Sometimes these rivers are only rivers when it rains and then they completely dry up. That causes a different texture of the soils. And then in some places, it's identified really like certain mineral rich areas. So one river basin may be really iron rich, which is why the soil is really, really red. And then the next river basin over will have much less iron in it. And you'll have more brownish or white or chalky soil. So this is mostly centered, this variation in river basins is mostly centered around the Texas Hill Country. The Texas High Plains is much different than this. We have two major soil types up there. That's really broad. We have two major soil types up there with some subtle variation and depth of soil. But in the Texas Hill Country, we have 10 to 20 river basins cutting through and causing for massive shifts in the soil and mineral and organic matter from one place to another. So when we talk about a place like the Pedernales River Basin, that's what we're identifying. We're identifying the character of one river basin and the minerals that are present there and how it impacts the wines. So the Pedernales River Basin is really calcareous. There's hard limestone that fractures, that allows for great drainage, for great retention of acidity. And then there's chalky layers on top of that that tends to be a mixture of sand and clay with a high amount of organic matter. That's something that we're finding at High Estate. It's something we're finding at Vintage Press. That organic matter and that high amount of nutrients is there available in the soil. And what's crazy is growers in the Texas Hill Country for a while have been told or have seen that the soil here is really, really shallow. And they say that it's not useful for growing grapes. All the nutrients is locked by things like salt. But with practices that are associated with regenerative farming, regenerative farming practices, we're able to unlock the nutrients in the soil with soil treatments or by planting the right grape varieties or by affecting our irrigation and water use patterns in different ways. This all is allowing us to discover the Texas Hill Country and how these river basins vary from one place to another. So for such a dry state, and this is the thing that stands out to me about the Texas Hill Country, for such a dry state, to know that Texas soil was so defined by water, it was created by water. It's just a really, really beautiful thing to think about Texas wines growing out of soil that was created by water, that is so still impacted by the flow of water and alluvial deposit, that there's such life in that soil. It's gorgeous because I think of Texas as a desert, as a big old desert, the Texas High Plains, the Great American Desert. We thought that it wasn't possible to grow grapes up there. The Texas Hill Country, we thought of as having shallow soil that had mostly eroded away. That's what river basins do. They erode things away. That's why the hills were created. The river basins flowing through created valleys amongst the hills. And we find out now that we can use that to create beautiful living wines. And that's incredibly special. And we're at the beginning of discovering all of this. So 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, I think we can expect a lot more variation in the AVAs in the Texas Hill Country specifically. Maybe we'll have some coats of our own, all individually pieced apart and identified. And I think that we'll see the surrounding area played with a lot as well, because there's exciting things happening on all sides of the Texas Hill Country, in addition to what's happening here. Just a reminder, y'all can ask questions in the comments. Let me know if y'all have any. And I'm going to see if y'all have asked anything so far. Mark, I'm going to tell you about the Uplift Vineyard next and the soil types there. Julie's commenting on the red dust at Uplift and the burrs in the shoes. Yes, it just looks like a big desert, even though it's humid. Oh, Ellen, thanks. Ellen likes the wine racks on my wall. What wines do you have on the middle rack? The last 3 bottles on the bottom. This is a Heath sparkling wine. It's a Blanc de Blanc. These 2 are Parissos wines. They are right next to Uplift, up in, I think they're in Burnett County, where Uplift is. Very close by, and they make some beautiful wines. So I have the Bella and the Giulianico, which were delicious summer wines. I need to chill those down and drink them soon, actually. So Uplift Vineyard is in the northern part of the Texas Hill Country. It is north of the Pedernales River Basin. And just so y'all have an image, the Pedernales River Basin impacts the bottom half of it flows through the bottom half of the Texas Hill Country. It's probably 1 million acres. I couldn't say for sure, but compared to the 9 million acres of the Texas Hill Country, this is about 1/9 of the size. And it runs through a part of the Fredericksburg and the Texas Hill Country AVA. I'm going to share the map just so y'all can see what I'm talking about. So the Pedernales River Basin it runs through a part of the Fredericksburg in the Texas Hill Country AVA. And then north of that, just north of that, is the Llano Uplift. The Llano Uplift is currently being petitioned for. It has a perfected petition by the Tax and Trade Bureau. And you can find more information on that at ttb.gov. This is where they have an interactive wine map. They have all of the petitions so that you can read them. Again, that's ttb.gov. I love their interactive wine map. The Llano Uplift probably is spread across 4 or 5 different counties. And Bell Mountain AVA is actually entirely situated within the Llano Uplift. So Uplift Vineyard is one vineyard inside of this proposed AVA, and it's on the eastern side in Burnett County. And Uplift Vineyard is specifically impacted by the Colorado River Basin. So the iron-rich soil, the red iron-rich sandy soil that's pulled from the bottom half of the Texas High Plains is pulled all along its path, and it deposits across the Texas Hill Country and Uplift Vineyard, and then flows out into the Gulf. So what we say is that the Uplift Vineyard is in the alluvial fan of the Colorado River Basin. So the soils that you find at Uplift Vineyard that you see, they are alluvial deposits from everything in the Colorado River Basin's path. So wherever it starts and everything on its way is deposited in that path. Now the Llano Uplift has a really, really different base formation than the rest of the Texas Hill Country, which I mentioned is mostly sedimentary rock. The Llano Uplift is billions-year-old granite. So this is hardened magma that hardened so much that the soil that eroded from over it, the sedimentary rock eroded from over it because it wasn't packed quite as tight, so it all eroded away. It's really shallow soil that's been deposited now by the Colorado River Basin. So we're planting vines essentially through really shallow Colorado River alluvial deposits into that billions-year-old granite that started to break up into the soil. It creates a really, really different, I mean, you can imagine, a really different style of wine than the rest of the Texas Hill Country at large. especially the Pedernales River Basin, which is much more sedimentary rock with sand and clay mixture and a high amount of organic soil, very different than the Llano Uplift and specifically Uplift Vineyard. So part of the reason that that soil is really kind of chalky and dusty and reddish brown is it's iron rich. It's really shallow. It's mostly soil that's been deposited and will likely blow away eventually and be replaced by other soil. But Uplift Vineyard is specifically four really different soil types over that granite. So they have granite on granite, sandy loam on granite, and then clay on granite. So that vineyard is really interesting to dig even further into because there are other factors, not just the base formation and the soil that's deposited, but there are other reasons why the soil types have collected in one place or another across that vineyard. And we plant the varieties and we treat the varieties differently based on the soil type that they're growing into. But I want you all to imagine across the Texas Hill Country, varying depths of soil, varying elevation. I want you to imagine great drainage when you plant a vineyard on a slope. Great drainage of water is a wonderful thing in a humid subtropical climate. It means that we have the potential to plant grapes and give them enough water, but not too much in a really rainy area so that they're too happy. We want stressed vines. And stressed vines are what you find in the Texas Hill Country as long as you're planting in the right place, in the right path of the wind, with the right drainage, in the right soil type, with the right grape variety and the right rootstock. What the Texas Hill Country to me is going to mean expertise. We have expert growers right now coming in and planting the right chosen select grape variety with the right rootstock for the soil that they're planting in, with the right irrigation method, and then doing soil treatments that impact their specific soil type based on what nutrients are available there or need to be unlocked. It really, really varies in the Texas Hill Country. And so we can't treat this region as if it's all the same at all. It is so different from spot to spot. And it's going to be really exciting, I hope, for all of you to discover this as you taste the wines of the Texas Hill Country. So my challenge for all of you is to, when you get a Texas Hill Country wine, find out where the grapes were growing. Start to discover through taste the variation in the Texas Hill Country, because remember when we said that AVAs, when they're petitioned for, there has to be some consistency in climate, soil, and terrain that you put into your petition. And I always say that the Texas Hill Country, the consistency of the Texas Hill Country is variation. For sure, it's going to vary in elevation, terrain, soil type, and more. And it's really, really exciting to see that happen. All right, I'm checking in the comments again. We're coming to the end of our session and the end of Texas Wine Month. So this is your last chance to ask questions about anything we've talked about before. Steve, yeah, I love Heath. That Blanc de Blanc is one of my absolute favorites from them. And as we get into the holidays, I'm going to stock up more. As well as with our Pet Nat. I keep each of those on hand, William Chris Pet Nat and Heath Sparkling. Oh, Alan, thank you. Yes, I'm pronouncing Pedernales wrong. It's Pedernales. And thank you for correcting me. I learn a new city or region or term in Texas every single day. And even though I'm from Texas, it's all like a foreign language to me. Pedernales. I wish I could go back and adjust that for every time I said it. Mana, great question. Who develops the irrigation systems and assesses them, and where the water comes from or is taken from? I would guess that each region and each aquifer, or maybe each city, each county has different water boards that impact a certain amount of area and make some of these decisions. The water boards, I would say, probably have the most control, but the growers are who develop their own patterns for irrigation and look at the best time for watering and maybe dialing back water at some point so that you can dial forward water at another time. I don't know much more on that. That's a great question for someone like Chris Brendrett, or some of the people who work on our production team at the vineyard. I will challenge myself to find more out about that for you. Mark, great example. Can you give an example of a soil treatment? So there are so many different ways to talk about soil treatments. Soil treatments is highly associated with biodynamic farming. There are, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called. They're treatments that are put together. It's herbs, it's a different organic matter that's kind of bundled together in a sack and then buried, and it will leach into the soil and impact it in one way or another. Part of what it would do is increase the like biodiversity of plant matter in the ground and support the root systems in that way. It could also increase the oxygen content of the soil so that there's more room for the soils, for the root system to grow deep. There are different acids that you can add to the soil that will unlock nutrients. And nutrients can be locked by things like salt and magnesium. And when you have sedimentary rock that's from things like calcium and magnesium that's found in seawater, when that precipitates and creates soil, you end up having a lot of these nutrient locking minerals in the soil. So unlocking those would mean adding in something that will bind to those minerals and prevent them from locking the nutrients. So they'll lock onto something like an oxygen, or they'll lock onto another polarized compound. They will be rendered inactive and release nutrients into the soil. You know, that was my best shot at trying to speak like our growers. I'm still learning much more about this. It's something that regenerative farming is something, and soil treatments is something we're going to be talking more about. And so keep asking those questions. It's something that is all experimental right now. There are many, many different ways to tackle this, but as always, the goal is sustainability. So every step that we're going to take is to benefit the soil and make it richer, to make it more living, meaning that we don't have to do as much in the future to the soil. If we can create this biodiversity and this system underground where the soil can support the nutrients that it has there and be able to give it to the plants, and the plants can interact with it and then pass it from plant to plant, and the root systems can be expressive and connected underground. All of that is the goal. We're trying to create a living underground system where the nutrients that's in the soil is shared with the plants that are there. And a big part of that is increasing biodiversity. So you don't just have to do a soil treatment. You can plant cover crop. You can plant crops in the area that will complement what your plant needs and what is available in the ground, because all of the nutrients that are available in the ground are beneficial for the grape in certain amounts. So if the grapevine needs more of one thing and less of another thing, planting a cover crop can allow for that balance to happen. If you plant the right cover crop, it will take the nutrients that it needs, and hopefully that is what you have excess of and need less of for your grapevine, so they can share what's available. And it all takes testing. It takes a lab. It takes sending out soil samples. It takes a lot of research, a lot of trial and error. We don't know if anything that we're doing is going to work, but we're really smart. At least the people who are putting this together are. Our vineyard team's incredible, and they're great about educating us about what they're working on now. All right. Jennifer, I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know enough about it. She's asking about the water boards and what I mean by it. But I just don't know. Alrighty, guys. I am going to finish drinking these wines, and this is the end of our time together. So, again, post in the comments when the best time for y'all to do a virtual tasting is. I want to hear back on the times we're choosing. When y'all want to be drinking wine during the week, is Wednesday your day? Like, that is the day to be drinking wine. Is it a Tuesday? Is it a Thursday? And tell me if you're going to the Art of Cellaring Wine tomorrow at William Chris Wine School. That's going to be a fun class where we talk about tasting wine and determining the ageability of the wine just based on sight, smell, and taste. And the last thing that I can ask is we are William Chris Wine School. We offer education. We support the education of Texas wines and wines of the world. And we hope to do it in a world-class way. And so if you enjoyed this series, the information here, if you want to learn more, leave us a review, William Chris Wine School. I will see some of y'all tomorrow, and hopefully I will see all of y'all at the next virtual series, which should be coming up very soon. So stay tuned and look out for that on our shop and events page at williamchriswines.com. Other than that, I'm off. Bye, everyone. Happy Texas Wine Month.